This is Patrick McCarthy reporting from Tri-Cities Community Television in beautiful downtown Port Coquitlam in Lee Square. Today our show is focusing on the knowledge worker, or as most people know, the dot-coms or the technology companies in our area. And in the Tri-Cities, we sometimes are surprised that we have a lot of knowledge workers or technology companies that are changing the world in their small ways. Today we have with us Jason Hanley from Rumie, and Rumie is an enabler of distant learning in some very interesting places. I know we chatted over coffee, and now this is our new coffee room, but can you just give us a little sense about what Rumie is doing? And I guess some people will be very surprised that that kind of technology company has a footprint in the Tri-Cities.
Rumie is a nonprofit. They're actually a registered charity in Canada and the United States. And our goal is basically to bring education to all of the underprivileged children in the world. There's so many children in the world that don't have access to basic education. So our goal is to bring it to them through the use of technology. That's essentially Rumie in a nutshell.
And the thing is, your CEO, when he started out, Tariq Fancy, I mean, it was one of those cases where a person with money, I guess, or successful in business deciding to sort of turn around and say, I can make a social change through technology. Because you're kind of a startup, but you're not really. I mean, you've got some pretty amazing stories to tell about what your company's doing. But can you kind of tell us a little bit about the CEO and what's inspirational about his message?
Yeah. It's a pretty unique circumstance. So he was in finance in Silicon Valley and, of course, did very well by bringing the sort of mobile phone revolution to a lot of these areas that you wouldn't expect, like in Africa. And a lot of people told him at the time that it just wasn't possible, that you had to go a different route, use like really advanced technology, or that you just wouldn't be able to reach certain communities. But he had an idea that just using very basic technology, as that price would come down, they would essentially leapfrog what we've done here in the West with our sort of landline infrastructure. There's still a lot of organizations that ship big, heavy textbooks to Africa, which is very expensive. And in a lot of those climates, the books don't do very well. Which
is amazing, because even locally here, your $500 book to go to SFU is quite thick, But I guess the key thing I remember reading is that Bill Gates and those guys were talking about that $400, $500 laptop or computer. So really what you're saying is that the iPad or the Android device is now that display system that allows them to actually access this education.
Yeah, I think you're talking about the one laptop per child project that I believe started somewhere like in the mid-2000s. It was like maybe 2005 or so. It was, again, a great idea, a great initiative, but a little bit too early. It's one of those things with technology, if you're just that little bit too early, the things don't come together and you run into a lot of problems. It's been very successful in a lot of ways, and one laptop per child was groundbreaking in a lot of ways. But again, just things with the technology and the cost at that time made it difficult. I think now, more than 10 years later, the technological trends have now gotten to the point where it makes the problem much easier to solve.
Yeah, and I guess, for people out there, sometimes we hear about technology like Uber as a disruptive sort of, technology is disrupting the norm. But it sounds like you guys are working with NGOs and you're sort of enabling or enhancing what's already there through a technology, I guess, framework that allows them to work with it.
Yeah, one of the most difficult parts of this is the fact that, sure, we have internet available everywhere, right? It's on our phones. We can go almost to like the middle of a forest and still have a good internet connection. But there's many places in the world where internet access is very difficult. Even in the Arctic, they have like satellite connections that are very slow, very expensive. So yeah, our solution was designed from the very beginning to be able to work actually 100% offline. We used sort of we came up with sort of a unique idea of using those little SD cards. They can store a lot of information. So if we want to send an update to a remote place, we basically just copy all the content onto these tiny little SD cards, and we can just send them in an envelope in the mail. So you bypass the internet completely. So our solution does work when you have good internet access, and then everything, the content can automatically synchronize and that kind of thing. But if you don't have good access to internet, these SD cards provide a great way around it.
Especially with a drone.
You can ship them in via drone.
10,000 SD cards in the
We
drone.
hadn't thought about that, but that's a good idea going forward.
So in your sense, we're talking a little bit about the concept of remote working, but for yourself though, how do you look at how Rumie is affecting the world? Give us a story that for you is a proud moment for the company, but also for a reason why you work there.
Sure, I would say most recently we have a deployment in Guatemala with a partner there called Pencils of Promise. So one thing, Rumie always works with a partner that's sort of on the ground in that area. We don't actually go to work out all the government logistics and that kind of thing. We need a local partner. So in this case, our local partner is another not-for-profit called Pencils of Promise, which I have to say is also an excellent organization. They've been really great to work with. And a very interesting thing with that, we apply what's called sort of an iterative approach to building our software. So we build version 1, and very quickly we send it out into the field and want people to use it and give us feedback so we can improve it, bit by bit. So we deployed all these tablets, and it was a situation where the children using it were in areas that don't have internet, so they went off for a full school semester, about 3 months, and they came back, and we got all the data from the tablets. Once they came back, they were collected and rehooked up to the internet. And we learned that despite our great efforts to basically lock down the tablets and make it such that they could only access educational materials, one particular young student there had figured out a way to bypass the security and use Bluetooth to upload like movies and things to the tablet and watch movies instead. So we learned a great lesson that that our technology was not infallible, and of course we had to spend a lot of time then working on the technology aspect. But again, because of that feedback, we were able to modify, deliver them a new version of the software, which has already been deployed now. It's already going for the next 3-month period, and we'll get to see the results after that. But we were thinking maybe we should hire that child as an intern, considering.
It's like prospecting for new talent.
Yeah, exactly. So that was a great example of how we were able to learn and respond and adapt based on actually putting stuff out there and trying it. I think a lot of organizations kind of have these grand ideas and want to come up with the perfect solution. There is no perfect solution. You've got to come up with a solution that works, try it, improve it, rinse and repeat.
And we got a couple minutes left or shorter, but I really wanted to highlight the fact you live in the Tri-Cities. So for parents out there or even people looking at sort of technology companies to work with, you are a true remote worker. Like you're in charge of a development
100%.
team.
Yep.
It's not a startup. It's pretty nimble, or it's called rapid deployment. You've got customers, you've got revenue, but you're really working with a very tight sort of.
We still operate like a startup, to be honest.
Yeah.
We're still pretty small.
But it's kind of that the snowstorm comes and you're still working in a coffee shop or working from home. So just your sense of people who are knowledge workers and taking on or considering working for someone that maybe has a remote sort of working relationship. What do you feel about that?
I think it's great. 100% remote working is not for everyone. It really depends on kind of your personality and what you prefer. And don't get me wrong, I mean, I do actually go to Toronto where Rumie is based on a relatively regular basis, probably once every quarter. So, 4 times a year. And I think that's actually very important too. So the first thing to say about remote work is that face-to-face time is still really important. But you don't have to have face-to-face time 100% of the time. We have great technology now. We have things like Skype. We have things like Google Hangouts, which is a similar thing. It gives you audio calls, video calls. It's not the same as being in person, but it's close enough for a lot of purposes. We use something called Slack, which is running all the time. It's basically a text chatting instant sort of thing. And again, that lets you kind of feel like you're, feel like you have like a closer relationship to your coworkers. You can talk to them, you can like send pictures and that kind of thing. So it keeps you in touch and keeps the personal aspect of the work relationship going. So I think technology has made it a lot easier to work for an organization that's headquartered somewhere, but actually live primarily somewhere else. I've worked remotely from New Zealand for a year. My wife and I lived in the Caribbean for 3 years, and I've worked remotely. You can do it anywhere that they have reasonably good internet. And I say that because the Caribbean had like barely acceptable internet, and I was still able to get by.
Well, and get a suntan at the same time. So I want you to thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you.
I guess we'll post where folks can learn more about Rumie.
That would be great.
And we can obviously continue with that story. Again, this is Patrick McCarthy reporting from Tri-Cities Community Television. It's very exciting to sort of find out that there are knowledge workers in the Tri-Cities working for companies in Toronto. And so when your kids are on Skype or a Google Hangout and you think, what are they doing? Maybe one day they can be like Jason and be a CTO of a company that's going somewhere and changing the world.